Let's kick things off and get started. Really appreciate everyone taking the time. We're recording this, so anyone who's hopping in the next couple minutes will be able to look back at my rambling at the beginning of the webinar. So thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about how AI is transforming the way that org merges can be done inside the Salesforce ecosystem, and just really just want to take a moment to really thank everyone for taking the time here. This is a time where, Hubbl, we see ourselves at the middle of the Salesforce ecosystem, looking across, working with Salesforce themselves, the direct customers, as well as partners across the ecosystem. I really appreciate you taking the time, whether it's morning or afternoon for you today. And today we're really going to be looking at how AI, process intelligence, transforming the way that we're working inside of org merges in Salesforce. Myself, if you haven't met me, Mike Bogan, I'm one of the co-founders at Hubbl Technologies. I've been in the ecosystem around 13, 14 years, something like that. I joined a consulting partner, Traction on Demand, when we were about 20 people. Became the first solution engineer there, and helped scale it up to about 1,500. And it was acquired by Salesforce. And so in that time, I worked across hundreds and hundreds of accounts with Salesforce across all industries. And since that acquisition, I've been focused on building out the Hubbl Technologies platform to drive success across the ecosystem. And then prior to joining the Salesforce ecosystem, I spent about 10 years inside of the US Department of Energy, doing AI machine learning projects. About 20 years ago, we started doing some defense projects at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, as well as at Stanford University. And so that's really the basis of the machine learning and AI that's inside of the Hubbl Technologies platform. And really excited to have with me Diana.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Diana Losi, a customer success architect here at Hubbl. Prior to Hubbl, I spent about 13 years in the Salesforce ecosystem working with consulting partners like Aperio, MTX, and then Torrent. So I am excited to get started today. I'm bundled up a little bit because I'm about an hour south of Indianapolis and we are covered in snow still. So but let's jump in. Let's get started. So why are we here today? Why are we talking about org merges? Well, they happen, and they're not necessarily rare. Whether it's an M&A situation, both parties have existing orgs, or you're a company that has a multi-org strategy that's combining orgs, or similar to an org merge, maybe you've been on core Salesforce for a while with a custom build and you're transitioning to industry cloud and you're kind of moving from this, how we built things custom to some processes are already defined, some automations are already existing, and we need to kind of assess that. You're all in a situation, you've got existing processes that need to be brought together into new environments. You've got data, you've got teams you're bringing together, and there really is no magic button. So even though we are going to talk about AI today and about, how we can kind of ease the planning of org merges, there's still no AI button that's just going to do everything for you. But we do have AI insights that can help the humans, us, that work alongside AI to bring a successful org merge to fruition. So that's what we will be focusing on today. So at first glance, it may sound pretty straightforward, right? Take these things, put them over here, take these things, combine them. But that's rarely how it goes. It's really not how it should go if you want to be successful. There's a lot of nuances, and org merges are just really hard. There's a lot that makes it hard. It could be you may not have access to the environments in question. So back to our first scenarios, if you're inside an organization with a multi-org strategy, there's probably a way for you to get access to all of those orgs, right? However many it is, whatever org's in question, there's probably a way for you to get in there a little bit. But if you're in an M&A situation, you may not have access to both orgs. You may only have access to one org, but maybe not able to get access to that other org, or other multiple orgs, depending on what your situation is. If you're a consulting team that is looking to estimate a timeline for an org merge, it's likely you don't have access to, it could be both orgs that you may not have access to. So you've got to try to get a lot of information and try to figure out what's going on in these orgs, sometimes without even being able to see them. You've got decisions that need to be made quickly. You might be combining teams. Like, for example, we talked about that M&A scenario. There's a team that handles cases at company A. It's now going to be part of the team that handles cases at company B. So now you're understanding two teams' ways of working, how they handle cases, the types of cases they handle. You're making decisions on how to handle discrepancies. You're adding in layers for differences that didn't exist before, but now you need to account for them. You're reworking the whole process, and it's no longer taking what was here and putting it there. You've got stakeholders that you're working with from multiple places to kind of align these processes and align on the go forward big picture future state. Even in a scenario where you have two different processes being brought together in the same org, it's likely that at least one of these orgs has been around for a while. So even if you're thinking, okay, Sales Cloud and Service Cloud, we're going to bring them together, that should be enough difference, right? One of these orgs has probably been around for a while. There's technical debt to consider. The process builder that was built several years ago is not necessarily what you want to be moving to your new org. So again, it's taking a bit longer to figure out how to take what's here and put it there, how to bring two things together. You're thinking about data and overlapping data potentially. You think about accounts, right? And every org is likely going to have accounts. Are there completely different sets of accounts? Are they similar? How are we going to identify these similar, the exact accounts? And how are we not going to overmatch on those accounts? You've got integrations to think about, and how is this data going to interact with the existing integrations? Will all the integrations remain? You've likely got timeline set before you. That's maybe pretty aggressive, but you got to do some work to validate that timeline. You've got change management and change enablement to think about, how you're going to communicate these changes and how you're going to get users excited about the changes that are before them and not dreading another move from one system to another and another set of processes to follow. So there's a lot more things that make it complicated. This is just a quick window into all the things that are probably flying around as you think about an org merge. So we know it's not just a migration. It's not just a take it here, put it there. There's a bigger story, more complex, more nuances. So with any project, you want to make sure that you're thinking about your own why. Why are we bringing these orgs together? Is it to simplify certain processes? Is it to reduce expenses? Is it to foster better communication among the teams? Whatever the reason or reasons are, they just need to be clear, and the whole team needs to approach the project through that lens. You need to consider the complexities in your specific situation. So really being able to identify what is making this situation more complex. There's no cookie cutter, this is how you merge an org solution, because every business is different, every customization is unique, and every decision is impacted by the business. So that is why there is no easy button here. But knowing those complexities and knowing the things that make your situation unique, you want to then make a plan for your merge and make sure to consider the fact that there is some unknown still. As much as we want to bring all of the surprises or remove all the surprises up front and make sure that we have as much information as we can going in, it's still possible you're going to run into surprises at some point, ideally sooner rather than later, given that you're trying to get as much information as you can up front. So, but we do need to make allowance for the unknown and the fact that things may come up along the way that need to be addressed. And just know that you can't fix everything. So there's prioritization that needs to happen. As we look at an org, there's always going to be something that we want to potentially change. There's always something that's coming next. But really being able to hone in on, based on your timeline, what can we actually accomplish during this time and figure out how that prioritization will work. So with that, we've kind of got this 4-phase approach to doing an org merge and a migration. I think it'll look pretty similar to most projects you've gone through, but we'll just kind of talk through it with an org merge perspective for a second before we jump into some of the thoughts as we go through these and some of the demos there. So we start with discovery and assessment. You got to spend time understanding the orgs, the goals, the teams, the processes. This is really where you do want to spend the time. When you try to fly past this, to hurry up and execute, because it always feels like the bulk of the work is in execute, like let's just start doing. But when you end up just start doing, you're making a lot of assumptions that may be proven wrong. hopefully they're proven wrong quickly so you can pivot and adjust, but sometimes they're not proven wrong right away, and it comes up later in the project. And if you would have spent that extra time in discovery trying to figure out and trying to learn more about those complexities, then you might have been able to mitigate some of that. Then we go to strategy and design, where you're taking, what you learned in discovery and assessment. You actually start thinking about what you're going to build. You're mapping processes together. You're adding those considerations for the things that don't align between the orgs. How are we going to handle this? And really thinking about, how we're going to bring these two different, similar but different things together. Then we move to execution and validation. You're actually building and testing your work. You're probably running multiple work streams. Like we talked about before, you got teams focused on data, integrations. You may break up the different parts of the business of a sales work stream, a service work stream, or whatever that might be that you're working towards to kind of bring together. You're gonna build it, you're gonna validate it, test it, get it in front of users, do your data loads, test the integrations, put all of it together and make sure it works. And somewhere in there between this and the next phase, there's your go live. There's your big pivotal moment of these orgs have their first go live as being merged. And now we've got to think about optimization and governance. Because it doesn't stop at go live. Go live is a big moment, but you probably were against a timeline, as we talked about. You can't fix everything, like we talked about. You need to continue to monitor after go live, continue talking with teams, understanding their processes, building upon their processes, enhancing them, and have a team in place to hear feedback and consider that against the goals of the org merge. What are the next steps? Now that we've got everything in here, how do we circle back and think about some of those things that were lower priority? So we're going to kind of, to set the stage here, we're going to kind of go through each of these phases, and I'm going to talk through some of the questions and the things swirling around during that time. And then Mike's going to kind of walk us through a bit of a demo in some different items. So discovery and assessment, right? There's probably two major decisions that are top of mind. They may have already been made. They may be part of the evaluation or being validated as part of this, but survivorship and timeline. So survivorship, if you got two orgs being combined, one org may be the survivor and the other org might get merged into the surviving org. There might be a third org that gets introduced that will be brand new, and the two orgs will then become one and a net new org. We kind of talked about the industry cloud transition before, and how that may be a situation where you just have one original org, but the new org is so wildly different with the different objects that will be considered and with the different automations that will be considered and the different features that it kind of makes that similar and bucketed that into this org merge situation. So you got to think survivorship. You might be validating that or evaluating that as part of discovery and assessment. And then you got to think timeline. So there's probably some idea of timeline going in, if not a date already decided. But this is your chance to validate what can we really do in this timeline. It may not be possible to move the dates, but we have to think about what are the risks. If the timeline is a bit aggressive, how do we mitigate those risks? What ways can we simplify what we're doing to meet the timeline and consider maybe more minimal viable product as we bring things into a new org? And how we want to consider, what we bring over and making sure that the quality of what we bring over, and making sure we're not bringing over things that, we're just looking to immediately clean up. So there's likely some questions that you're thinking and then in the lens of both of those, thinking about how do we learn more about each of these environments? How much data is in the org? What's the quality of the data? What objects and what clouds are being used? Where is there overlap between those environments? How much automation is there? What type of automation tools were being used? Is it process builders and workflows still? What packages are there? What technical debt exists in the org? So we've got all these questions rolling around, all these things to kind of figure out, to help us figure out and think about timeline and think about how we're going to, start and move into strategy and design. So how are we going to get all of this information? That will take a very long time to get manually for one org, let alone 2 or more orgs. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Mike, and he's going to walk us through a demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana. Should be popping up the screen here in a second. All right, so that's obviously where the Hubbl intelligence platform fits in. What I'm going to go through today, I want to talk about how we can leverage both the org intelligence side of our platform focused on the metadata and understanding adoption inside of the org, as well as the process intelligence side of the platform, to give you a sense of how data is actually moving through an org and give you a sense of what you need to handle inside of those org merge scenarios. And then we'll also talk about how we can leverage the AI and Agentforce vibes to accelerate any of the work that you're doing inside of these org merges as well. And so the Hubbl platform itself, it's a SOC 2 HIPAA compliant platform. It's trusted by over 10% of the global Fortune 500 now. And essentially, the way this works, if you look at the org intelligence side of things, you have an unlimited number of users that come in, have access to the platform. And if you want to analyze one of these orgs that you're merging, you're just running a scan against that org, connecting to the org, whether it's production or sandbox, scheduling that scan to run either now or to schedule that scan to run monthly if you are doing this in a monitoring type of scenario. The results themselves, what Hubbl is actually doing, it's connecting to the org, it's analyzing the metadata, it's using machine learning and classification to generate optimization opportunities for you. It's comparing and benchmarking the orgs against thousands and thousands of orgs against the ecosystem, so you can understand quantitatively and objectively where this org sits relative to everything else. It's generating those recommendations for you. It's understanding the adoption, how users are actually using that org. And the way it's organized is through a series of tabs. And I'm going to go into detail into the tabs as we go through today. But you can also see what you can do is you get access to these results. It takes less than 20 minutes for the average org to generate these results. You can share those scan results with your team members just by sharing it via email. So a lot of customers like to do this. They're sharing it with their consulting partners, or the consulting partners are sharing it with their direct customers. And it allows everybody to collaborate on a single view of the org itself. You can export all of these results out into a CSV. And then you can also leverage an AI architect that leverages pre-built prompts that helps guide you and to understand even more about these orgs that you're working inside of. So if you're, if you think about these scenarios where you're a center of excellence managing multiple orgs and you're trying to get an understanding of what's happening, you might not have direct engagement in those orgs, but you want to get an understanding of the most important items in this org. You might want to think about things like, how custom is the specific org that I'm looking at to merge? So here we're looking at the Ask Hubbl AI architect is telling us the percentage of records that are inside of, for example, namespaced packaged objects versus custom objects and standard objects. This gives you a lay of the land in terms of the way org intelligence works. Now I want to just highlight, if we were going through these org merge scenarios and trying to answer some of these questions we were just discussing, how we can leverage the results inside of Hubbl to accelerate this. And I just want to make sure this is completely conversational. So if anyone has any questions, you can throw it in chat. Feel free to chime in, make this conversational too. Happy to answer any questions at any time. So if we were looking at a scenario where we had 4 orgs or multiple orgs in an environment, you can see, depending on when you're planning those merges, understanding where the data resides at the highest level helps you understand where you're going to be focused. So this org, for example, has got 50% of the data sitting inside of standard objects. It's got some of it inside of packages, these namespaced objects, things that have been installed from the app exchange. Whereas this org it's sitting at almost 100% of the data, over 12 million records inside of standard objects. There's almost no custom object data and just a little bit of namespaced objects. So this gives you an understanding of what you're going to be planning for. So think about this org. It has the majority of the data inside of namespaced objects packages. So you're going to be involved in not only migrating that data, but you need to understand which specific packages are holding that data, because that's where the majority of the action is happening inside of this org.
Mike, you've got a question in the chat. Is it possible to get to the next level of detail, such as where a specific field is referenced across different metadata types?
Yeah, for sure. So if we dig into and I'll dig into this inside of field utilization as well. So what field utilization is doing is it's showing you where the data is actually, how much of the data is actually residing in specific records. And so this is an individual object, the contact object. These are the specific fields that it's actually referencing. There's a couple ways to get access to the metadata dependency pieces. You can access directly inside of setup. So it's connected to your Salesforce org to give you those metadata dependencies. You can also leverage integrations that we have with regards to partners like Swantide, as well as Agentforce Vibes and Agent for Setup, that helps you understand those dependencies as well. All right, moving into looking at understanding how is the org itself actually being used. So one of the things we've done is we've used machine learning and classification to classify the thousands and thousands of orgs across the ecosystem. So think of this as, hey, is this particular org are they using Sales Cloud? Are they using Service Cloud? But beyond that, are they using Revenue Cloud? Are they using unclassified objects inside of packages? How are they actually using the Salesforce org itself? And this is just showing you some examples of Salesforce orgs and how they're using the Salesforce completely differently based on their business process. And when you're planning those org merges, getting an understanding of what they're using and what they're not using is absolutely critical for you to understand how you're going to be managing these org merges. And this, we kind of jumped ahead in that field utilization. This goes all the way down to the field utilization level. So they may be using the case object in both of these orgs, and you might be trying to merge those orgs together. But even in the standard fields on that case object, one org can be using the case object completely differently than another org, and getting an understanding of where that data resides, where that overlap is coming in, is going to be critical for you to understand how you're going to be doing those merges. And this type of field utilization, it goes all the way into those custom objects, standard objects as well. So if, again, we were looking at the contact objects here, what you can do is you can actually filter this down. So just show me what's happening with the custom fields on this object, for example, as well as removing those ones that are namespace. This will help you understand, are there fields that we can truly ignore or potentially clean up in this merge process, because these 0%ers where there's no data over the last year are candidates for investigating whether you should be actually merging these and bringing these fields across at all. Many times we see orgs that have just been brought together. They basically just take every field off of every object and just recreate them in the new orgs, and you end up with this stack of fields that are sort of slowing people down in reporting, making it unfriendly in page layouts because they've just brought those fields across. And this helps you quickly navigate between all these objects and identify those scenarios where you could be cleaning up in your planning process prior to doing those merges.
Mike, as you transition, we've got another question in here. I think I know the answer, but love to hear your take. When the org is scanned and compared against a benchmark, will the metrics of the scanned org go into that benchmark? So is it negated from the benchmark? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So essentially, the way to think about it is, and I'll get this. I'm going to hit onto that in a few minutes. I'll dig deeper into the benchmarking and the complexity and things like that. But essentially, that when you scan an org, it's what Hubble's actually doing is it's analyzing the metadata, it's generating the results output that you're seeing, and then it's purging all of the metadata. It's purging the tokens to access the org, and it's just using those benchmark results of the analysis to actually do that benchmarking. All right, so we've talked about some of the data. We've talked about where that data resides. There's even, the ability to dig into how many duplicates are living inside of these orgs. This is definitely something that's going to help you understand your data migration process. But what about the automation? Every org is automated in a different way. The reason we get Salesforce, the reason businesses are being built on Salesforce is because of the amazing automation capabilities on the platform. And so what you're looking at here is a different view of Salesforce that many of you may have never seen before. Essentially, each one of these circles is an object in the org that has record triggered automation, whether it's workflows, triggers, process builders, and flow. And then the larger the circle, the more automation is on that object. And so what this helps you do is when you're going from org to org to org, understand immediately where the hotspots are for the automation inside of the org. And it also gives you a breakdown of all of the automation in the org itself. So the light purple ones are the custom automations that have been built versus the dark purple ones, which are actually namespaced namespace automations that have been installed in the org, come from App Exchange packages or installed packages. And so this helps you understand how much, there may be a huge amount of automation in the org, but a lot of it might be just coming from the packages themselves that have been installed in that org. And this helps you manage and understand where that automation is coming from. So for example, in this org, there's a large amount of namespaced or installed package triggers. There's some custom automation in here as well. And this allows you to, again, filter. There's always filters across all this capability in terms of giving you an understanding. For example, what automations are coming from packages, namespaced packages. Maybe I just want to look at the active automations that are in here that are coming from namespaced or not namespaced. So now I have an understanding of what I need to explore to actually bring across into this org. And then another key is getting at the automations that are, for example, if I'm looking at all these automations, I could filter them down by specific clouds that I want to dig into. But sometimes we just want to get an understanding of what are the automations on a specific object, give me an understanding of what's actually happening in this object. So these are all the automations that are active, the events that they're firing on. So we can actually understand and do comparisons across orgs to get an understanding of the automations that we need to deal with. Another really important one here too, when you're thinking about the complexity in these orgs, is looking at, especially when you're dealing with older orgs that have had multiple teams working inside of them, is looking at how the trigger frameworks have been built. So a lot of times we're seeing that triggers in the Salesforce orgs have been built on objects with multiple triggers firing on the same events. And this causes a bunch of random consequences in the automations that are going to, if you merge those all together and just bring all of those triggers into the new environment, this is going to cause all kinds of unintended consequences and have impact on your user's experience by slowing things down and hurting adoption. So this is the type of thing that you would see popping up in recommendations in our results as well. Another really straightforward one is, hey, what about all the inactive automations? Do I want to bring these across, or just completely archive them and leave them behind in that org merge scenario? All right. One of the other key things we've been doing is just gamifying this migration to flow. So a lot of these, in these org merge scenarios, you're dealing with legacy automations. These legacy automations of workflow rules and process builders are significantly slower than before save flows and triggers. And so what this does is it actually accumulates across the experience of all the users in the org. And so what we do is we're actually calculating the amount of time users are spending watching records save based on these legacy automations. And you can see for some of these orgs, it can tally up to thousands and thousands of hours, depending on the number of these legacy automations, as well as the volume of records that are being handled here. And these are minimum numbers of amount of time that they're being spent watching these records save. And think about this from that survivorship. When you're thinking about survivorship, do I want to focus on the org that has a huge amount of automation in it, legacy automation, Or do I want to focus on a cleaner org? Do I need to stand up a separate org and migrate everything into the new org? There's a lot of factors that feed into this, but this helps you understand what you'd be dealing with if you were working in an org that has some of this technical debt just residing inside of it. Now, we've talked about how people are leveraging the data in the org, the automations in the org. A lot of time people are augmenting Salesforce with packages. And the packages inside of the org hold automation, they hold objects, they hold all kinds of things in there. But these packages, from an org merge perspective, become really challenging. So if you're coming across an org, maybe you're in an org that has a small number of packages or a large number of packages, that's going to have a big impact on your timelines and what you're dealing with here. And if you look at the way that Hubbl Org Intelligence is digging into packages, there's a few important things here. So one of them is, obviously, you have the key metrics around what are the packages inside of your org, whether they're security reviewed or not. Which do you really want to bring across packages that have not been security reviewed by Salesforce and have those in your new environment? Another key one is just packages that are out of date. So through our machine learning classification platform, we've been able to create a way to identify whether there's new versions of packages available for the first time in the ecosystem. And what we found when we started benchmarking this in 2022 was that 99% of Salesforce orgs have out-of-date packages in them. And we always saw this in our consulting days, but this is one where we're seeing it across the ecosystem. It's getting a little bit better now that we have this ability to detect them automatically. But it became very apparent why this was happening. We all run our lives on these devices. These devices tell us when our apps are out of date. In Salesforce, we've been installing apps into our businesses for almost 20 years now, and we've never had a way to know whether these packages are out of date. So think about those scenarios where you're merging businesses that they might even have the same packages in them, but they might be operating on different version numbers. Right? Or if you're moving into a new org, think about what version of that package you're moving in and what you're setting up as you're migrating that data across. And then if you want to dig in even more and get an understanding, hey, is this particular org even using this app? Now you can dig in deeper, get an understanding of how the package itself is actually being utilized, see the record counts on these individual objects, when they were last utilized, see what's being used, see what's not being used, so you can better plan that migration path. All right, and thinking about, this is all talking about the installed packages in the org. The other part of when you think about apps that are in the org is actually the connected apps. So these are the things that are external to Salesforce. These connected apps are things that are helping you understand what's actually happening from an integration perspective across this org. And that will give you, when you think about a connected app, is something that's actually integrated via the API. So what connected apps is doing is helping you inventory all of the apps that are connected to the Salesforce org. So all the number of users that are using them, the number of times that app has actually been called via the API to access that data. And it also gives you a lens into that security lens. Oftentimes in these org merges, that surface of connected apps and integrations can sometimes lead things astray if they're not completely fully inventoried with regards to what should be there and what should not be there. This helps you inventory that in minutes. All right. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff to discover and assess. We're not even close to touching on the full surface of everything that needs to be done inside of these orgs. But one of the things that we're really focused on is pulling this all together to give you a lens on where an org is relative to the other orgs that are in the ecosystem. And so this ability to look at just the high-level metrics around the type of issues that are being uncovered in a specific org gives you a sense of where that org stands relative to everything else. And all of this rolls up into something that allows you to get a sense of where this org stands relative to everything else from that benchmarking perspective. And so, Nikhil, you're asking around how the orgs are benchmarked and whether the org data, the metadata results, it contributes to that benchmark. The answer is yes. And the way it works is that We basically want a way that is quantitative and objective as to where this org stands relative to everything else. And so this complexity score is looking across all of that metadata results and getting an understanding of how complex that org is relative to everything else. So if you're merging together a couple of orgs that have a complexity of 1 and 5, you're going to be dealing with a much more straightforward merge scenario than if you were merging together multiple orgs that have higher complexity above this benchmark that you see here. Great. Now, all of this information, everything that you see here, this is all information that gets generated in a couple minutes by creating that and connecting your Salesforce org and analyzing it. One of the biggest challenges in the ecosystem is that visibility challenge. And this is where this concept of a scan request actually comes in to help this scenario. So think about this. You might be in a center of excellence where you are managing 5, 10, 60 Salesforce orgs. Oftentimes that center of excellence is overarching and providing guidance across those orgs. It doesn't have access into the org. Sometimes they have access to all of the orgs. You might be a consulting partner who's working, like Diana mentioned, you might be working across multiple orgs and not even have access to them. What Hubbl does is it solves a pain point that I lived through time and time again as a solution engineer at Traction on Demand for over a decade, is not having visibility into the org leads to challenges with regards to understanding what's happening in that org and getting accurate estimates around how that work is going to be done. And so this ability to do a Hubbl scan request, which is an org audit by email, is a completely new paradigm in the ecosystem that allows you to get visibility on what's happening inside of an org by simply sending an email to your stakeholder that's managing that particular org, and it allows them to actually get visibility to the metadata results in that SOC 2 and HIPAA compliant manner. And the thing that's really powerful about this is that you can get that visibility across those orgs, get a better plan with regards to merging them together and doing it in a way that's completely secure. Now, the thing that takes us to the next level is the pace with which you can do this. So we've had customers come in even on the 30-day trial of our product and basically come in and analyze. There's one specifically that analyzed 21 orgs in 40 minutes, just connecting all of those orgs, analyzing all the data, and got a full visibility across all of the orgs within their business in less than an hour. All right, so that gives you some visibility across the discovery and assessment side of things. Let's move into strategy design, and we'll dig into some of the process intelligence side of things as well.
Hey, Mike, as you transition into strategy and design, we've got a question that I think kind of gets into that as well. So are there any tools that help in consolidating the automations across orgs, since a significant amount of business logic is embedded in these automations? Yeah,
for sure. So if I think about some of the partners that we're connected to as well, so things like Swantide, obviously Agentforce Vibes and Agentforce Setup, they're connected to the business logic. And one of the things you're going to see when our process intelligence is actually showing you how the data is actually moving through the org. And we'll deal with that inside of strategy and design as well.
Yeah. So if you want to hop to the next slide, we will jump into strategy and design. So here's where we are actually thinking about how we're going to build, right? What are the most important processes that we're bringing together into the new org? How are the users actually working in the org today? How does their data move through the org? The goal here is making a plan for how to turn 2 processes, 3, however many processes into one, or into what we need in the new org. And to do that, we really need to know what's actually going on. Not necessarily what was built and what is supposed to be happening, but what's actually happening. So you definitely, we need to sit down with the team, talk through the process, understand the pain points, get clarity in the most important steps. That isn't necessarily replaced by this, but like I said, there's often a difference between the happy path that was built and the way users are actually using the system. So how do we really understand what they're actually doing? Usually when you sit down and walk through things, you still end up walking through happy path scenarios. It can be really hard to get to those edge use cases about what about this scenario, or, is there any time when you do this? And there's a way, as Mike's going to show in process intelligence, that we can actually see what has happened in the system, and we can use the data that we see from real life data in their system to actually drive those conversations, understand those edge cases, and figure out what that process needs to be going forward.
Yeah, and so one of the key questions at the beginning when you're first looking at one of these orgs is literally where are the hotspot processes? And we already looked at this automation piece where you can see there's huge automations on specific objects. That obviously helps you understand where you need to narrow in, because if there's a lot of automation built on a specific object, then that's a process that you want to dig into and focus on. Now, with regards to process intelligence, you actually want to with regards to the question earlier around getting to the actual business logic in here, by baselining this process in a data-driven discovery method using process intelligence, this allows you to actually understand what is happening inside of this Salesforce org. And so just to give you a sense of what's going on here, so process intelligence is the Hubbl process intelligence platform is an app exchange app that you install in your org. And what it's doing, this is the first time that process mining has ever been built on top of the Salesforce ecosystem. It's showing you how the data is actually transitioning through this particular object. In this case, it's the case object. And it's showing you all the cases going from open to closed. The white boxes are the statuses. The green arrows are the fast paths, and the red arrows are the slow paths, the bottleneck. So I'm looking at this inside of duration. You could also look at it in frequency, for example, if you want to see where the most frequent processes are happening. But what does this allow you to do? So it allows you to look at all of the variants that are happening in this process. So it's helping you understand what is the business logic that's actually happening in the business. And think about this. All those times that you've ever done those stakeholder workshops where you're working within the business, trying to understand current state, you're mapping out current state, you're using your favorite tool to document that, things like Lucidchart, to get an understanding of how this business is actually using Salesforce. Depending on who's there, what they know, how long they've been there, you get a view of what's happening in the current state. And in a standard scenario where you're just working inside of one org, you have that current state, you use that information to map out a future state, and you design that future state based on that information. And oftentimes what ends up happening is that you end up designing a future state based on incomplete information. And that incomplete information leads to a scenario where you go into training and change management and people are putting up their hands. They're like, what about this scenario? What about that scenario? And literally people groan because they know that there's a whole bunch of rework and change coming. That whole situation gets just amplified in the org merge scenario that we're talking about, right? You've got existing processes happening inside of a business. You've got one team that's doing things a certain way, even on the same standard object, the case object. You've got another team who's doing processes that may be somewhat similar, but happening in a little bit of a different way. And then you're being asked to bring all of those together. Now think about it from the lens of doing this in a data-driven way, where you're leveraging process intelligence to actually see what is happening in the org right now. You've baselined it. You can actually see what's happening in this particular process, even before you do those discovery workshops with them to figure out what their view of the current state is and where you're moving to the future state. And because you can see things like identify these bottlenecks, what's amazing is you can actually drill down into these and actually get insights of like, who are the people I need to talk to in this that might be owners in this process. In this example, it was actually a retail call center, and they had a specific case type that had a manual process happening offline, and it was slowing everything down. You want to know this before you're doing these merges and bringing these processes together, and this helps you get a data-driven lens, even without talking to the stakeholders in the business. And the amazing thing about this, and I think just like in my heart and bones, I wish I had this back in the days when we were doing these discoveries, because it instantly lets you know where to ask why. Why is this happening? Why is there a delay in this specific process? What's actually going on here? And what's really incredible is that because of the AI and the predictive intelligence we built into process intelligence, it's actually making you recommendations around ideas about what could make this process actually happen even faster. So that gives you a little bit of a lens of how process intelligence digs into that business logic and gives you a sense of what's happening when you're doing that. That this is kind of a mix between that discovery and assessment phase as well as the strategy and design phase, because you'd want to do this not only across this one particular process, but you'd want to do it across multiple processes, right? And so the thing that's amazing about this is that now, well, I just showed you one process for one org, but what if, I mean, I've got two orgs or I've got multiple orgs. Now I need to do comparisons across those multiple orgs. And so this is an example, just shifting to a RevOps scenario. This is where, just to step back one, the important thing about process intelligence is that you can save these visualizations. You can save them based on the filters you have in place. So maybe I'm filtering based on a specific business unit that's doing RevOps in a RevOps scenario, or maybe it's filtering based on a specific set of users or a geo, something like that. But because you can save them, you can do comparisons. And these comparisons are incredibly powerful. It allows you to look at processes, the way they're happening. You know, if I was in one org, the way it's happening right now versus the future. And in this case, it's looking at processes across two different orgs. So just walking through this, the first one here is the process, the sales view that's happening in org number one. And this is the sales view happening on opportunities for org number two. So we've got the two different processes. We can look at them directly. We can explore. We can do all that drilling in that I was showing you earlier. But what you can do is you can actually have a single comparison view of these two processes. And so remember, we're in opportunity now. These are the statuses on the opportunities. And so we've taken those two processes and merged them into a single diagram. And so you can see that both of these processes use these different orgs to use process prospecting and qualification in their opportunity statuses. But one org, the blue boxes here are org number two, and the gray boxes are org number one. So you can see visually the differences that are happening between these two orgs. And right away, just looking at this helps you understand, hey, this business uses ID decision makers as their language for verifying the key contacts that this business is using. In this scenario, they're both using a value proposition stage, but proposal and price quote in org one versus needing contract in org two, and so on. This helps you understand. And like I said, the important point here is you can do this without even talking to the stakeholders. You can actually get this information and see what's happening in the business. You could filter this by, you know, what's happening over the last year, what's happening over the last 3 months, get a sense of what's happening inside of the business with recency, so that when you're doing this merge, you're taking over the most important things and digging into yeah, great question. So this is actually, so just stepping back into this visualization, what it's doing is it's actually looking at the field history tracking on these objects and providing you a visualization of the results of that exhaust data that's inside of the org. And right now, I showed you the case object. I showed you the opportunity object. A question we often get is just, you know, can I do this on other objects? You can do it on any standard object, any custom object. It allows you to build processes that are containing multiple objects. You can actually import event log data coming from external systems, visualize that in here as well. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how in that strategy design phase, you can dig into the business logic, the way that people are actually using Salesforce themselves, and get those better data-driven discoveries and understand how and where you're going to be merging these processes together. All right, let's move into execution and validation.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're actually doing the work, right? We've gone through discovery and assessment. We've made some decisions. We've done our strategy and design. We've got an idea of what we're going to do. Now we need to do it. We're taking all the information from discovery that we learned about technical debt, legacy items, objects that are being used, packages that are being used, or packages that were installed that are not used. And we're doing the build, we're testing it. We're actually working to map and migrate our data, update our integrations. So we learned a lot in discovery, right? And we've thought about it a lot in strategy, but now how can we actually take some of the things that we saw, some of the things that we learned, and turn those into actionable pieces of work and use AI to help us do some of that work?
Sorry, just answering some of the questions here. Yeah, so with regards to the security, I'll dig into that in a second. And then with regards to the tracking, basically you just need to have the field history tracking enabled on the objects that you want to use to visualize the processes that are in here. That's not going to have an impact on the performance of your org. It's just basically doing the field history tracking there.
Yeah, it just needs to be on that step field too. So Mike had talked about filters that you can use. Like you don't necessarily need field history tracking on those because it's going to use the current value. You just need field history tracking on the boxes, the step, whether it's stage or status or whatever the step field might be.
Yeah, and the great news is those are automatically turned on, for example, in opportunity statuses or opportunity stages and case statuses. So you'll have that data there regardless. All right, so the other question there was around security. So how can it help us reconcile conflicting security configurations to be merged, sharing profiles, roles, territories, things like that? So one of the things we're doing is we've talked about kind of things that we're digging into, uncovering. One of the most important things we're doing is we're looking across all that metadata. We're putting it through scoring thresholds. We're identifying issues and optimization opportunities. And then we take those and we rank them by the severity of the issue and the level of effort to address them. So naturally, issue severity ranks up to the top if there's security issues involved here. And we've obviously seen more recently with the advancements of AI and the voice phishing capabilities that are happening, voice and phishing capabilities out there. There's been all kinds of challenges with regards to the way that people have not secured their connected apps in the orgs because of the self-authorization issues, and these will pop up in these high severity issues up here. And so what it's doing is Hubbl is not only is it's giving you information around what's happening inside of the org. So for example, we looked at the packages and we identified packages that are out of date, that aren't secure, reviewed, things like that. But it's actually rolling it all up into this action plan for you that gives you that prioritized roadmap to actually address them. And so this allows you to break this down and even filter this. You can, again, we built this, when Zane and Mark launched the well-architected framework, soft launched it in 2022, we started building this directly into the platform so that you could track and trend the issues with regards to the well-architected framework. And then you get recommendations down below that give you visibility with regards to how it impacts the Hubbl score itself. So if you fix these issues, you will increase your score by a certain amount. And then what happens is that you can actually dig into an individual issue. So we were talking about security. So if I click into these high effort security issues, we're talking about things like these SOCL injection issues, for example. The FBI put out an alert in 2024 on this. They actually put an alert in 2025 on the connected apps, but SOCL was first. SOCL was in March of 2024. And we see this everywhere, all over Salesforce orgs, where people have built custom code in Apex that has SOCL injection risks. And so what that means is that hackers can modify the queries in the code and extract data out of the org. And that's a bad thing when you're merging those together. You don't want to bring those into the new org. I saw a question there. Yeah, so what type of profile is required? So any profile that can be used to run a Hubbl scan. So just to answer that question, any profile can be used. But as you know, but Hubbl respects the permissions that are available to that profile. So what that means is that if you use a system administrator, you'll get the most thorough results across your org, because that system administrator will have the highest visibility. And there's a set of permissions that are required to run the scan results and to get the full results. And there's an FAQ on the site that you can dig into there. So is any of the metadata or data sent to an LLM? So none of the metadata is sent to an LLM. So what happens is that Hubbl connects to the orgs, analyzes the metadata in a temporary scan container. No human ever has access to that scan container, and it's temporary. It's only there for the time that it's actually being scanned, and the average scan time is less than 20 minutes. It's around 15 minutes, something like that. And so the metadata gets analyzed, and then the metadata is purged. All the tokens to access the org are purged, and all that remains is the results of the analysis. And so the results of the analysis are used in the machine learning and classification to do, for example, things like the benchmarking. And to get specifically to your LLM question, the Ask Hubbl agent, what it's doing is it's looking at the metadata results, and it's built on top of Gemini. So it's allowing you to get a deeper dive into the results yourself. So, and we're happy to go through any deeper dive on the security aspects of things here. But like I said earlier, Hubble's trusted by over 10% of the global Fortune 500, and we've gone through every named security assessment you can imagine. All right, so focusing on this sort of these recommendations. So what Hubble's done is it's identified these security issues. You don't want to bring these across in your org merges. Ideally, you would resolve these first. And so the way we're helping you out here is by generating AI prompts automatically. Thousands of AI prompts are generated automatically that you can then copy directly to a clipboard and leverage your favorite AI code builder to actually resolve these specific issues. The way this works, oops. If we just walk through this process, for example, that custom code security audit, those results that I showed in that matrix there, they're coming from the custom code security audit that Hubbl runs across the code in the org. And that security audit is using Salesforce's default code analyzer. So that's it has ESLint or the PMD analyzer, ESLint in it. And what it's doing is it's showing you an executive level view of those results. It's showing you the frequency of the violations that are identified, and then it's showing you the API versions that are obsolete in your org, for example. And so this custom code security audit is going to give you a lens on how secure org 1 is versus org 2 versus org 21, or however many you're merging together. Then what Hubbl allows you to do is leverage our recommendations to not only get a better understanding of why this is important, something to resolve, linking out to admin developer level solutions if your team wants to work on that. It even links out to the Salesforce documentation, the well-architected framework documentation. But it also allows you to create JIRA tickets directly from the recommendations so that you can assign those into your team. So oftentimes Salesforce product owners are leveraging Hubbl to monitor the work that's being done in an org. So for example, the custom code security audit, a very common use case is I'm a Salesforce product owner working with consulting partners or my team, and I want to be able to understand inside of a sandbox whether they're developing secure code before it moves up into the production instance. Now you can monitor that, and not only can you monitor it, you can generate the tickets that will help the developers resolve those issues. Once you've created that JIRA ticket, now the developer can start working, and they can even leverage, for example, Agentforce Vibes to be able to resolve that issue. So as I showed you, you can copy the AI prompts that are automatically generated in Hubbl to work together with Agentforce Vibes. If you haven't seen Agentforce Vibes, this was launched at Dreamforce in Dreamforce 25 in last year. And so this is just giving you a lens on how Hubbl works together with Agentforce Vibes to accelerate things like these security code fixes. So you just copy that prompt, and then Agentforce Vibes has a planning mode where you can just dump that prompt directly into Agentforce Vibes. Agentforce Vibes will then, in planning mode, allow you to review your prompt, get an understanding of whether this is the right approach that you want to take. And then what it'll do as you move into the final stages is actually it will, because it has the context of the metadata inside of your org, it will generate the actual proposed code fix to resolve that particular issue. And then you, as a human in the loop, or your developer, maybe if you're managing the org and you're sending this off to the developers can then leverage that proposed code to derive the fix that they can deploy in that sandbox and then move up into production. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how the progress that's being made and the pace that can be made with regards to resolving these fixes. Remember, this is a scenario where you can generate this roadmap of action items to address in your org in minutes, and now you can actually generate the code fixes in minutes to help resolve these issues that you might have. And you can do this pre-org merge, or obviously if timelines are tight, you can do this post-org merge as well. All right, let's move on to optimization and governance.
Yes. So as Mike mentioned, like, hopefully you've been able to incorporate some of the technical debt fixes, some of the things that have come up, or the high security issues as you're working through your org merge. So hopefully you're moving less technical debt, less security issues, get less unused items to the new org. But there's likely some things you didn't get to, especially if you're looking at thousands of technical debt issues in front of you, depending on how big, how complex, how much code is in your org. So lower priority things probably, fell off a bit. But we do need to think about how to keep working through that, right? We don't want to be in a situation where that actually starts throttling our ability to use the system and to be successful in Salesforce. So, we can continue using those AI prompts like Mike alluded to, like even after go live, continue identifying new issues, getting those AI prompts and working through those with Agentforce using AI even after the merge. You also want to start thinking about the actual usage of the processes. So there's, like I said before, there's often a difference between how something was built and how it is used. That's no different here, right? You took a process, you took multiple processes, and you kind of built a new process with new considerations, new things to think about. But now users are going to start using that process with new things in mind, right? New considerations that we didn't have to think about before. Now there's different decision points, different things, because we brought teams together, we brought processes together. So now that team's using that new process for the first time. We want to continue monitoring it to see how data is moving through the system, to see the adherence and compliance to the new process. We want to find bottlenecks, inefficiencies, things that we thought that were going to work well that don't work so well, things that we thought the team was going to use a lot and they're not using a lot. Be able to work through optimizing those processes, uncover new use cases that we thought we got them all. We looked, even using process intelligence, we looked through and we saw the edge cases. And you know what? When you bring multiple processes together, new edge cases arise, right? New data sets are being brought together. So we want to continue to monitor even after go live, because like I mentioned in that very beginning, we talked about the 4 phases, right? Go live is a really critical point in the process, but it's not the end of the org merge, right? There's a lot more to consider when we think about the longevity of the org going forward. So we'll walk through a few more tools.
I think like one of the best ways to think about this too is through, I actually want to share a story that was presented at Dreamforce this year. So one of our customers, Barracuda, they were in the world of this post org merge world, right? So they had all kinds of CPU timeouts. It was blocking quoting. They couldn't use, like, their sales team couldn't even create quotes sometimes. And what was happening is that all of these org merges over time was piling on complexity, was piling on security issues, and they didn't really have any documentation around what was happening in the past. So what happened was an enterprise architect from Salesforce recommended they just run a Hubbl scan and get a sense of whether there was a path forward here, because the CIO had come in and they were literally at a point where they either needed to stand up a completely new org, do a giant migration project to a new org, or potentially even re-platform off of Salesforce. But the enterprise architect was like, hey, just run a Hubbl scan, get an understanding if there's a path forward here. And so we ran the VP Business Systems there. Stuart ran the Hubbl scan, got a path forward in terms of their modernization issues, the security issues that were inside of that org, and they worked together to resolve those issues. So we kind of seen this story play out as we've been going through today. Barracuda got their detailed recommendations. They started working across those recommendations, leveraging AI builders, using Jira to track development, and we're able to make huge progress very quickly in terms of securing the org and making the org more performant and resolving some of that legacy automation that was in there. And most importantly, the way Hubbl works is it tracks over time. So this issue lifecycle management, what it's doing is showing, and this is actually Barracuda's results, where these are the light blue ones here are existing issues that they had as they were doing each scan over time. And the green ones are the ones that were being resolved. The dark blue ones are new issues that have come up depending on what's happening here. So after that org merge scenario, you could think about being proactive and tracking and monitoring what's happening inside of the org from that metadata perspective. And then over time, they actually acquired Slack to better collaborate across the business, resolved a huge number of issues, and eventually rolled out Agentforce, Shield, and more. But most importantly, the team was able to focus on the business innovation that they wanted to. So this is Stuart's own internal dashboard showing the tickets that were coming into the business technology team. And as they started resolving the technical debt based on the Hubbl action plan, the number of tickets coming inbound to the team was being reduced dramatically, which meant that the team had more time to actually innovate on the platform. And most importantly, they had these incidents, these PNOT incidents, they called them, where CPU timeouts blocked the quoting. They had 9 of them in 6 months. After they started resolving these issues, they've had 0, and they've never had any since. And so this just shows you the impact. You know, you're in that org merge scenario. There's a lot going on, a lot of priorities, and you need to bring things together. And you might not be in a place where you can resolve everything right away, but having that roadmap and that path to move forward helps you actually resolve everything that's come together over time to get that org to be more performant. And then part of the tracking and trending that's also in Hubbl is that legacy automation gamification, right? So when Stuart and team started, they had 3,700 hours of people watching records save in their org because of the legacy automations that they had in workflow rules and process builders. As they were working through the business and working through that migration, they were able to shave off 1,700 hours by doing those migrations of workflow rules and process builders to flow or triggers, and you can actually watch how they were tracking and trending this over time as well. And all of this led to a scenario where Barracuda was able to take that complex environment of multiple org merges, get it innovation ready very quickly, move into multiple clouds, roll out Agentforce, and save millions of dollars in their management of the platform in general. And it basically transformed the way that they're actually working on top of Salesforce. And so that's inside of that org intelligence side of things. There's also the process intelligence, right? So think about when you merge those orgs together, now you're dealing with, hey, this is what was actually designed. This is what we expect to see happening as the data is moving through the system, but this is what's actually happening inside of the business. And this is where things can get challenging. And if you're not tracking that, things can get out of hand because you're dealing with, there's a lot of human elements in here. Besides the business logic that's going on, there's a lot of change management that has to happen, right? People are used to a process in a certain way. Now they're being told to do it another way, and they're still trying to adapt and change to that. And without having a mechanism to visualize what's actually happening in the org, sometimes that change management and training can actually be lost. Another great way to leverage process intelligence is through just identifying the bottlenecks themselves. I showed you that example where we saw this 2-week delay that was in that retail call center. So when that process is baselined, you can think about going into that new org merged environment, baselining that process, and then tracking it over time. And in this scenario, they identified automations that could be built to speed things up. And then as you do a before-after comparison, it actually allows you to see the changes that were made here and the impact that was made. So the bottleneck went from 2 weeks down to 4 days, and now their average case duration was gone from 13 days down to 3 days after that change. And this is the type of thing you can leverage over time as you're building out those flows. There's another lens from a more of a compliance perspective. So it's like, this was the actual proper process that was expected in that revenue operations perspective, but this is what's actually happening inside of the org. So this gives you a lens on how to actually track these changes that are happening for these customers over time as that org merge is moving forward. All right. So there's obviously a lot going on inside of these org merges. I know we've kind of gone over time here, but I would just want to thank everyone for their time and attention, the questions. If you're interested in just leveraging that 30-day trial, like I said, we've had customers come in, analyze all of their orgs in minutes to get an understanding of what's happening there. We'll also share some resources with you as well with regards to how you can de-risk and accelerate these org merges using AI. And I'll pause there. Thank you again for your attention. And if you have any other questions, we can dig into it. All good? I know we answered a lot of questions during the time, so appreciate everyone taking the time, and stay safe and warm out there. We'll call it that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.